or even criminal negligence on the part of board members. And yet, a close examination of those boards reveals no broad pattern of incompetence or corruption. In fact, the boards followed most of the accepted standards for board operations. Members showed up for meetings. They had lots of personal money invested in the company. Audit committees, compensation committees, and codes of ethics were in place. The boards weren't too small, too big, too old, or too young. Finally, while some companies have had problems with director independence because of the number of insiders on their boards, this was not true of all the failed boards, and board makeup was generally the same for companies with failed boards and those with well-managed ones. In other words, they passed the tests that would normally be applied to ascertain whether a board of directors was likely to do a good job. And that's precisely what's so scary about these events. Viewing the breakdowns through the lens of my 25 years of experience studying board performance and CEO leadership leads me to one conclusion. It's time for some fundamentally new thinking about how corporate boards should operate and be evaluated. We need to consider not only how we structure the work of a board, but also how we manage the social system a board actually is. We'll be fighting the wrong war if we simply tighten procedural rules for boards and ignore their more pressing needs to be strong, high-functioning work groups whose members trust and challenge one another and engage directly with senior managers on critical issues facing corporations. The inadequacy of conventional wisdom. Over time, good governance advocates have developed no shortage of remedies for failures of governance. Most of these remedies are structural. They're concerned with rules, procedures, composition of committees, and the like. And together, they're supposed to provide vigilant, involved boards. However, good and bad companies alike have already adopted most of those practices. Let's take a look at some of the most common. Regular meeting attendance. Regular meeting attendance is considered a hallmark of the conscientious director. It matters a lot, and still, as shareholder activist Nell Minow comments, some big names on the boards barely show up due to other commitments. And when they show, they're not prepared. Indeed, some WorldCom directors were on more than 10 boards, so how well prepared could they be? Fortune's 2001 list of the most admired U.S. companies reveals no difference in the attendance records of board members of the most and least admired companies. Data from the Corporate Library, a corporate governance website and database co-founded by Minow, show the same acceptable attendance records at both kinds of companies. Good attendance is important for individual board members, but it alone doesn't seem to have much impact on whether companies are successful. Equity involvement. Board members are assumed to be more vigilant if they hold big chunks of the company's stock. But data from the corporate library don't suggest that this measure by itself separates good boards from bad either. Several members of the board of GE, Fortune's most admired corporation in 2001, had less than $100,000 of equity, whereas all board members of the least admired companies held substantial equity stakes. Not only did all but one of the Enron board members own impressive amounts of equity in the company, but some were still buying as the shares collapsed. Board member skills. Patrick McGurn of Institutional Shareholder Services, like other expert observers, has frequently questioned the financial literacy of troubled companies' audit committee members. It's certainly true that many board members have their jobs because they're famous, rich, well-connected, anything but financially literate. But just as many board members have the training and smarts to detect problems and somehow fail to do their jobs anyway. At the time of their meltdowns, for example, Kmart had 6 current or recent Fortune 500 CEOs on its board, and Warnaco had several prominent financiers, a well-known retail analyst, and a top-tier CEO. All those excellent credentials made little difference. On this measure, again, we find that Fortune's most and least admired companies alike had board members